Hi everybody. Today I have a new plugin for you, but just clicking on synchronize packages and repack won't do this time because you have to install a new installation package called Series 3. Yay! And before we really start, maybe a few words about why I made this Series 3 package. When I started making plugins about 5 years ago, I made some plugins with a quite naive attempt regarding audio resolution, screen resolution, automation stuff and all that. And I recognized I had to have a concept of meeting these things and solving problems about them. So I made the Series 2 plugins. And in the Series 2, I made all kinds of plugins. And the Series 2 will be the plugins where I keep making all kinds of plugins, while the Series 3 now has a concept. So I made a concept. What do we really need? What kind of mixing plugins? How should they be designed and all that stuff? And so I made a closed concept for the Series 3 plugins. And well, here they are now. And today we start with the equalizer, or with the equalizer, and the other equalizer, the equalizer, and the equalizer. Well, you see, that's one new thing in the Series 3 plugins. I tried to build categories, so we have an equalizer plugin which contains all the different equalizers in modules. You see that soon on the screen, but what I mean is we have modules that could have been single plugins, but you don't have to search, okay, what plugin name could be another equalizer and all that. So you just use the equalizers and find all the equalizers in there. The same counts for other Series 3 plugins that will come. So enough of that, let's see that thing. Okay, before we go into the details, let's have a brief look at what we have. And here we see the digital equalizer, which is an equalizer with 6 bands. And the next equalizer would be the EQT equalizer, which is a kind of classic tube equalizer. Then we have the TEQ, which models the equalizer of my big analog mixing desk, and I find that very musical. Then we have the N equalizer, which is another classic, and we have the graphic equalizer, where you have filter bands in octaves. And of course, you're not limited to just using one. You can use them all at a time, and you can also drag them in an order you like, and you can switch on and off every module. And now, before we look closer at the equalizers, maybe some details about the Series 3 features. Of course, they come with everything that Series 2 should do. So the plugins are resizable, and you can go to the menu, select the processing here. You can set up to 16 plugin groups. But one thing that is new is the tooltips. Of course, you can switch them off, or they are regular, or slow means it takes longer for them to appear. And the tooltips, of course, work as tooltips usually work. So they give you some information about what we see. Like for this saturation here, set the amount of the input saturation before the filters in the signal chain. Or set the output volume gain, and this is just clean gain staging, no saturation here, and so on. So you have tooltips now in the Series 3 plugins, which try to describe every element. Another new Series 3 feature is that we now have it easier to type in values. So for example, I want this to put at exactly 8 decibels. I just do a right click, type 8, hit enter, right click, -12, enter. And the third thing that Series 2 plugins didn't have, but what is a Reaper default, double click to reset the knob. Okay, now let's quickly go over the equalizers. I know that most of you don't find that too exciting because you know all the equalizers. So let's start with the digital equalizer. And maybe important is that we only see one filter at a time here. So we see gain, frequency, and the Q. And we can select the filters. So we have 6 filters, select filter 1, select filter 2, and so on. And we can turn on and off the filters here. And of course, we can click and drag the filters here, where the equalizer curve is shown along with an analyzer. Scrolling is for the Q. And of course, double clicking resets to 0. And this of course shows all the filters, even if they are not activated here. So we see filter 3 is not active, so it's kind of shady here. And now when I turn it on, you see the difference in the drawing. So maybe let's move around a filter with audio. And of course, for each filter, we can select if it's a low cut, a low shelf. And for the low shelf, of course, we can set the resonance as well as for the cut. And of course, we've seen the peak equalizer filters before. And we can set each filter to high shelf. Or even a high cut. And for the high cut and the low cut, we don't have a gain. Instead, we have a slope, so how steep the filter is. And well, yeah, that's basically it about the digital equalizer. Then we have this EQT equalizer, or EQT. Most of you will know that thing. If you don't know that thing, there's a lot of videos about that on YouTube. But of course, don't search the word EQT. You have to search maybe the term the Pultec trick, because that is the trick you do with the boost and the attenuation knobs here. And the trick is that these two are shelving filters. One's for boosting, one is for attenuation. And you select the basic frequency where they are working. And by the way, don't get fooled by these numbers. The actual frequency is much higher. Trust your ears. But well, the boost is always higher than the attenuation knob. So if you use both at a time, they are not just cancelling out each other. They give interesting equalizer curves. And for this section, I added a little switch here. Vintage is the classic mode where all the frequencies and stuff is as you would expect it. And I made a modern knob to suit the needs for modern mixing. So in general, the filters are set lower and they are not so wide. And this helps designing some stuffs about kick drums, bass and all that stuff for music that is really bass heavy. Okay, the rest is as you would expect it. Then we have the N equalizer. Here you can use the saturation knob. Let's hear that. So we go from no saturation to quite audible distortion here, and maybe two other interesting things. And the one would be that this equalizer really grabs your sound shape. So a tiny amount of gain has a big impact here, and that counts for all the gray knobs. The highs are set quite high, very high. Where for the lows and the mids you can set the frequency. And this is the second interesting thing about this thing. 35 Hz sounds pretty low, but you can really enhance your low end and kick drums and all that stuff in this 35 Hz position. So let's hear that. If you're listening on headphones or whatever, you'd notice that this already really made a difference. And now let's hear the mid frequencies. And you see, I just made tiny changes here. Let's hear it without the equalizer. And you could really hear how it brings the keyboards and guitars to the front in the mid section, how it puts some clarity in the hi-hats, how it gave the bass drum and bass an extra low end push. Let's hear that again. Okay, we have two left. Let's see the graphic EQ. And here, of course, we just have sliders for each octave band. But of course, the filters have a bandwidth. So maybe if I'm turning down the 2K band 3 dB and the 1K band 3 dB, I would have about 4.5 or something if I measure the 1K point or the 2K point, because the filters overlap and of course add up a bit. That's maybe interesting to know. So let's reset them. And finally, we have the TEQ, which, as I said, is modeled after my analog mixing desk. So this is in every channel of this desk. And here we have a low shelf and a high shelf, and low mids and high mids. And for the mids, we can select a frequency. And what makes this thing so musical is that everything in a way interacts. So how narrow or broad the filters are is depending on how much you boost or cut. And even in the shelving filters, the shape of the filter, let's say for the high frequencies, if it goes down to 5 kilohertz or 6 or 4, is dependent on where you set this knob. And the exact frequency you select for the midbands also shifts a bit with the gain. Sounds uncontrollable, but works great every time. And having all these equalizers in these modules and rearrangeable order gives us, of course, the possibility to say, okay, I want to use the N equalizer, but the high shelf is set too high and fixed for me. So I want to use the high shelf from the TEQ. Let's reset the other knobs. And maybe use the high shelf here, or use it from the EQT equalizer. And maybe we hear a frequency we want to remove here. So let's switch off these filters, choose filter number 2. And let's say whatever, we have a frequency at 500 Hertz. And of course I can bypass them all at once. Well, I think that's it. Well, I hope you find it useful and inspiring and all that. I hope you liked the concept of how the new plugins are made. If you didn't do already, click the little subscribe button so you don't miss the next Series 3 plugin. But for now, I hope you have fun with this plugin. I hope you have fun with all the Series 2 plugins and all that stuff. And bye-bye. And oh yes, I forgot to mention, chances are high that making so many modules and stuff, there could be tiny bugs in there. So feel free to report the bugs in the comments section in this video. And please do it in the usual way, not like the plugin doesn't work, but more like in when I do this and that on Windows 11, the plugin behaves like this and that. So I can reproduce and fix the problems. Okay, now, bye-bye.